Hi, welcome to It Doesn't Have to Be Terrible, a podcast with me, Caroline Snyder, where we explore, okay. Hi, welcome to It Doesn't Have to Be Terrible, with me, Caroline Snyder, a podcast where we explore the stories, topics, and questions that help us better understand how we as individuals impact and are impacted by the financial world around us. That only took 5 takes this morning. So starting strong. Maybe starting strong because I'm a little nervous about today's topic. Because I do not tend to speak ill of other people. In fact, I would argue that much of my brand as a business owner is about being nice a lot of the time. I'm curious, maybe like my sister or other family members or friends will be watching or listening to this and being like, that's not true. But it makes me a little uncomfortable. So there's the starter for today. Today's podcast episode, we're entitling A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. And to be totally honest, I originally came up with that topic name because this is launching the week of Halloween. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Costumes, right? It's great. It's perfect for Halloween. So I came up with the title before the content of the episode. But I actually think this might end up becoming a recurring series if I can get over my own insecurities. Because today we're going to dive into a financial institution. This time it's a human, but a financial institution who really embodies that phrase, right? A wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think you could almost take any financial institution or any financial like guru and put their names all in a hat and pick them out. And I could come up with this podcast episode, insert name here, right? But today we're going to go dive in on someone who has been in the personal finance game for a long time. It's Dave Ramsey. For those of you who don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he is a radio host, radio personality, and an evangelical Christian who has been really kind of famous in this personal finance world and in the U.S. evangelical Christian world for decades. In the last several years, there's been quite a few scandals that have come out about him and his organization. I'm not going to get into the scandals today. There's a lot of great reporting out there on it, and real journalists should do that, not me Googling things. But just to give you kind of an idea, he made some questionable decisions around COVID. He has sold advice. He's been sued by listeners because he really pushed this organization that was going to help you get out of timeshares. And that was that was just fraud. He fires women when they get pregnant. He has clauses in his company about, what does he call it? It's righteous living, I think is the phrase. But basically it's a great way of being like, oh, did you have premarital sex? You're out. Not surprisingly, really bad views on LGBTQ rights and just being alive. So he's kind of a dick. But I don't want to get into the scandals in part because I don't think that I'm well equipped to do that in the way that it deserves. But also because I think what often gets ignored or has been ignored recently is that beyond all of the questionable at best decisions he's made as a business owner and a public figure, his message, like strip all of that away, his message is incredibly harmful. So that's what we're going to get into today. Before we start that, I do want to say that, so Dave Ramsey has built his career on helping people get out of debt. He's a big proponent of the snowball debt method, which is something that I talk about with clients periodically, depending on their situation. And I think that he's done some good, right? I've had clients in the past who have said, you know, I used Dave Ramsey methods years ago and they were really helpful. I think that's true for plenty of people. The problem is the blanket, like one size fits all-ness of his message, that it makes it feel like it should be helpful for everyone, and really it's helpful for a select few. And it is harmful for lots of people. So I'm just going to scroll down to my notes here a little bit. The message he gives for this, like, get out of debt plan, that's the focus. The message he gives is really extreme, right? Things like only eat rice and beans. Don't pay your mortgage if you're trying to get out of credit card debt. Just like skip that one. Sell your car. Don't pay for gas. Cut your grocery expenses to nothing. The recommendations he makes are cuts to spending to the point of pain, and to the point of pain that is potentially very dangerous for individuals and families. And this is coming from an extraordinarily wealthy, white, cis, boomer man. His net worth at this point is estimated to be around $200 million. He's the son of real estate developers and has been in kind of the real estate and finance world since the beginning of his career. It's reported that he was a millionaire by his mid-20s, which is wild. He had huge legs up in the world, right? So a man being like, just eat rice and beans while I live in my estate feels questionable. He would argue, and he does argue, that he's in a place where he can give this kind of advice because he declared bankruptcy relatively early on in his career, sometime in the 80s. And his version of the story sounds really scary, and I'm sure it was. I don't think declaring bankruptcy is ever not scary, right? At best, you're declaring bankruptcy and having to deal with an incredible amount of like administrative, IRS, government, financial documentation, right? Like at best, it is tedious and awful. And then you add on the layer of guilt that people often have. You add on, there's judgment from your friends and your family, the wider society. It is not a pleasant process. His declaration of bankruptcy basically happened when he had a very robust portfolio, let's say. It was reported to be about $4 million at the time. And bank laws changed such that some debts that he had with banks were basically recalled. I mean, like, you have to pay this back. You're over leveraged, meaning you have too much debt. And so he declared bankruptcy. He had a $4 million portfolio, and it was about $1.2 million of debt that was being called back. We're not talking about he had no money to his name and he declared bankruptcy. We're saying this was a person who's already in a place of privilege and chose to declare bankruptcy because that was the best path forward in a difficult situation. That is very different than the vast majority of people who I know, or clients' parents or clients' friends or whoever it is. That's a very different situation of declaring bankruptcy. I mean, Dave Ramsey's bankruptcy declaration was a lot like one of Donald Trump's bankruptcy declarations. There's sort of like a string of these wealthy men, mostly men, who declare bankruptcy because it makes sense from a business perspective. Larry King is another famous one who did this. Stanley. There's sort of a series of men who are all about the same age who declared bankruptcy because it made the most sense. And I don't blame them for taking the path that made the most sense. But Dave Ramsey saying, I declared bankruptcy when I was a multimillionaire. And therefore, I understand how you, living below the poverty line with credit card debt, should get out of debt, does not make sense. Like, that's not analogous in any way. He was set up to land on his feet. He used the laws that were there for him to his advantage, no shade, and then was still able to use the high earning power he had through his, welcome cat, high earning power he had through his degrees and his previous professional life to be able to land on his feet, right? And I'm not saying that any of that wasn't hard. I'm not saying that any of that wasn't scary. I don't envy that experience, but it is incredibly important to note that that is not the norm, and that is not the norm for his audience. This is a very wealthy, very privileged man telling a lot of financially vulnerable people what to do as if he fully understands their experience. I think I would feel differently if it didn't feel so prescriptive, right? If it was like, let me learn more about your specific experience so that I can help you figure out potential paths forward, right? If he was acting as a financial coach is what I actually mean here. But instead, his answer is, this is what the numbers say, and so therefore you move forward no matter what. There is an extra element of this that I think is very, I was going to say harmful, and it is harmful, but it's beyond harmful. There's a morality and a value-based judgment on this. So this belief of, I am good, I am morally correct because I made some decisions, and now I am rich, I am wealthy, I am comfortable, I can hire all of my children into my business, I can create more generational wealth than was already part of my family's experience. And you are poor and are in debt and don't have the earning power that I have and haven't created generational wealth and don't own a home or whatever the list is. And therefore you've made mistakes and therefore you are morally below me. That's the subtext of this story. And that's the subtext of every single financial guru who's like, I'm a multimillionaire, I am a whatever, I have created this incredible portfolio, I own however many homes, and I am doing it because I'm making good decisions, and you're in the position that you are because you've made poor decisions. That's a moral judgment. That is a moral value that he and many other financial gurus are placing, and that's not reality. What is reality is that when you're born into a family that already has wealth and you're set up for success with education and the timing is right for what you go into and the laws are such that they're benefiting you when things go awry, you have a huge leg up, right? That's not morality. That's not Dave Ramsey having made wonderful decisions. That's the United States government supporting people who get into pickles like him, because the people who get into pickles that look like his pickles are also members of Congress, are also presidents. When I started looking up about people who've declared bankruptcy, there is a very long list of like former presidents who've declared bankruptcy. Generals, Congress people, you know, the people in power, right? I got off track and now I'm forgetting what I was saying. He was going to be able to be fine with some hard work no matter what, versus many members of his audience, many people listening to him, many people following him, maybe are in a similar position, but many are in a position where the way that they're going to be financially comfortable is by an incredible amount of hard work that Dave Ramsey did not have to do, and by like an incredible amount of luck that they may or may not have control over, because they're working against external systems that are going to be holding them back unless they figure out workarounds. Dave Ramsey could work with the system that is propelling him forward almost without trying, right? Being in debt is not a moral failing. Being impoverished is not a moral failing. Being in a financial place where you're having to make really difficult decisions and asking for help and using what you have around you is not a moral failing. And people like Dave Ramsey and people like, you know, any of the prosperity gospel pastors out there or churches out there are acting as if they have it all figured out when they absolutely do not have it all figured out. And it makes me incredibly sad to know that so many people are feeling bad and are feeling guilty and are feeling less than because they're listening to this very out of touch man sitting on a little podium yelling out into the radio waves for hours a day. Like, that person doesn't know at all. Doesn't know at all. So if you've been in a position where you're feeling bad or have heard people like him or grew up in a community where people talked like that and talked about how, you know, getting rich was a sign of moral fortitude, then I would love for you to take away from this podcast the opportunity to just shed a little guilt. It doesn't have to feel guilty. It doesn't have to be terrible, and it absolutely is not your fault. And what is the past is the past. And it's going to be easier for some people than other people. It's easier for me than a lot of people. Maybe not as easy as for Dave Ramsey, but we're talking about like shades of easy. And I hope that part of the outcome of my work is that some of that guilt and some of that shame can be taken away, because it's not you. It's an out of touch dude. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox for a minute here. I told you from the get-go that I feel a little uncomfortable with this topic because I feel a little uncomfortable just like pooping on somebody. But I'm also really curious what you think and what would be helpful for you from me. So if you're like, I actually want to hear about those scandals, like I want to understand how his righteous living clauses in the business like impact the wider world around him, and what we can do or what employees could potentially do. Like, tell me, because I would love to dive into that. It's also like pretty nitty gritty niche, and I'm not sure that anyone wants to listen. So I want you to give me feedback here. If you're like, I actually want to hear about other wolves in sheep's clothing, tell me that. If you're like, I've got a great one for you to dive into, send me your ideas. This is a episode in particular where I feel like I'm trying something out that is a little out of my comfort zone, but I think is important for people to understand. And I want your feedback to be like, yes, go out of your comfort zone, or like, maybe not for you. I'm open to feedback. I'm always open to feedback. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And I hope you learned something. I hope you feel like you can stand up, stretch a little bit, and move forward with your financial life with a little less shame and a little less guilt. The next time Dave Ramsey's face pops up somewhere, you can just roll your eyes and ignore him. There's no reason to listen to that man. He's also currently talking about how we should buy houses. Like, this is the right time to buy houses with interest rates so high. And his argument is like, well, maybe you pay a little bit more in your mortgage, but like real estate is a good long-term investment and you can refinance in the future, which is true, but it's not a little bit more in your mortgage. It is often thousands of dollars more in your mortgage, like as in no longer can you afford it. Anyway, ignore whatever he says. Please do that for yourself. And as well as always, I'm rooting for you. Reach out, email me, DM me. Please rate, subscribe, review, share with your friends, and let me know what you think. Have a lovely rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.